They say some images are too dangerous to look at, that some photographs contain such profound darkness that they can corrupt the mind just by viewing them. For over a century, one particular school photograph from 1909 has been locked away, hidden from researchers, students, and the public. 3 major universities have banned all study of this image, and anyone who has tried to investigate it has faced consequences so severe that most refuse to speak about their experiences. But today, I'm going to tell you everything I've learned about this forbidden photograph. Before we begin this terrifying journey, I need you to hit that follow button, because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you believe about the nature of evil itself. And trust me, you'll want to stay connected for what comes next. The photograph was taken on November 3, 1909, at Blackwood Academy, a small private school in rural Pennsylvania. The school specialized in educating the children of wealthy industrialists and prominent families from the East Coast. Everything about the institution seemed normal. Excellent academic reputation, well-trained teachers, beautiful Gothic Revival architecture nestled among rolling hills. But beneath this veneer of respectability, something unthinkably sinister was taking place. The annual class photo was scheduled for the first Tuesday of November, as it had been every year since the school's founding in 1887. 32 students, ranging in age from 8 to 16, gathered in the main courtyard, along with their 6 teachers. The photographer, a respected professional named Harrison Wells, who had documented hundreds of school portraits throughout the region, set up his large-format camera and prepared to capture what should have been an ordinary commemorative image. But when Wells developed the photograph 3 days later in his darkroom, he discovered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. At first glance, the image appeared perfectly normal. Children arranged in 3 neat rows, teachers positioned with professional dignity, everyone dressed in the formal attire expected of the era. But when Wells examined the faces more closely, he noticed something that made his blood turn to ice. The children weren't looking at the camera. Every single one of them was staring at something behind the photographer, something that shouldn't have been there. Their expressions weren't the typical formal poses of the period. They were faces frozen in absolute terror. Wide eyes, mouths, slightly agape. Some children appeared to be trying to move away from whatever they were seeing, but their bodies seemed locked in place, as if paralyzed by fear. Wells initially assumed there had been some disruption during the exposure, perhaps. A stray dog or unexpected visitor had caught the children's attention. But when he spoke to the school's headmaster about possibly retaking the photograph, he received a response that chilled him to the bone. The headmaster claimed that no such photo session had ever taken place. According to official school records, the annual class photo had been cancelled that year due to an outbreak of influenza. This is where the story becomes truly disturbing. And I want you to really think about what this means. Comment below and tell me, how is it possible for a photograph to exist of an event that never happened? What force could create an image of 32 children and 6 adults who, according to all official documentation, were never in the same place at the same time? Wells became obsessed with solving this mystery. He returned to Blackwood Academy multiple times, trying to understand what he had captured. During his second visit, he made a discovery that would forever change his understanding of reality. Hidden in the school's basement, behind a false wall, he found a series of journals dating back to the academy's founding. These journals, written in the careful handwriting of previous headmasters, told a story of systematic abuse, occult rituals, and unspeakable experiments conducted on the students. The entries described how certain children were selected for special education taken from their dormitories in the middle of the night and brought to underground chambers beneath the school. The journals documented horrific rituals designed to harvest the innocence from these children, claiming that their pure spiritual energy could be concentrated and stored for darker purposes. The headmasters wrote about contacting entities from beyond the physical realm, beings that fed on suffering and terror. Most disturbing of all, the journals revealed that the school had been built on a site of previous horror. Before Blackwood Academy existed, the land had been home to a colonial-era settlement that had mysteriously vanished in 1764. Archaeological evidence suggested that the entire population of 43 people had simply disappeared overnight, leaving behind perfectly preserved homes, meals still on tables, and no sign of struggle or violence. Wells discovered that the 1909 class photo wasn't the first supernatural image captured at the school. Previous photographers had documented similar anomalies, children appearing in photographs who weren't enrolled at the school, shadows that took human form in the background of group portraits, and most disturbing of all, the gradual deterioration of students' appearances in photographs taken throughout the school year, as if something was slowly consuming them from within. The photographer's investigation took a darker turn when he attempted to identify the children in the mysterious 1909 photograph. Using enrollment records and family contacts, he tracked down the identities of all 32 students. What he discovered defied all logic and reason. Every single child in the photograph had died within 6 months of the image being taken. Not from the reported influenza outbreak. The deaths were far more disturbing. Some children were found in their dormitory rooms, apparently having died in their sleep, but with expressions of absolute terror frozen on their faces. Others disappeared entirely, with search parties finding only their clothes neatly folded in impossible locations, atop the school's highest tower, in sealed basement chambers, at the bottom of a well that had been covered for decades. The teachers suffered similar fates, with most succumbing to what medical records described as severe nervous exhaustion, followed by complete mental collapse. Here's where I need you to pause and really consider the implications. Share this story and comment below. What do you think was happening at Blackwood Academy? Was it a supernatural force, a cult operating within the school, or something even more sinister? Your theories might be crucial to understanding this mystery. Harrison Wells compiled all his evidence into a comprehensive report, including the original 1909 photograph and copies of the secret journals. He submitted his findings to local authorities, the state education department, and several universities, hoping that academic researchers could provide scientific explanations for the impossible events he had documented. Instead, his report was met with immediate and aggressive suppression. The first university to examine Wells' evidence was Harvard. A team of researchers in the Department of Psychology and Social Relations spent 3 weeks analyzing the photograph and supporting documentation. The lead researcher, Dr. Franklin Morrison, initially approached the case with healthy skepticism, assuming they were dealing with either an elaborate hoax or some form of mass hysteria. But as the investigation progressed, Dr. Morrison and his team began experiencing disturbing phenomena. Team members reported nightmares featuring the children from the photograph. These weren't ordinary bad dreams. They were vivid, consistent experiences where researchers found themselves standing in the courtyard of Blackwood Academy, watching the photo session take place. But in these dreams, they could see what the children were looking at behind the photographer, a towering figure draped in shadows, with multiple arms that reached out toward the terrified students, like the tentacles of some cosmic horror. Dr. Morrison documented how exposure to the photograph seemed to create a psychological contagion among his research team. Scientists who had spent careers studying the rational aspects of human behavior began reporting paranormal experiences in their daily lives. Equipment malfunctioned in impossible ways. Photographs developed images that hadn't been captured by the camera, and several team members claimed to see the ghostly figures of children from the 1909 photo appearing in their offices after dark. The breaking point came when Dr. Morrison attempted to have the photograph analyzed using the university's most advanced imaging technology. During the digital scanning process, the equipment detected layers within the image that shouldn't have existed. Beneath the surface photograph of the terrified children, the scanners revealed what appeared to be dozens of additional images, different children, different time periods, all arranged in the same courtyard, all displaying the same expressions of absolute terror. Harvard University made an unprecedented decision. They sealed all research related to the 1909 photograph and issued a permanent ban on any further investigation. Dr. Morrison was quietly transferred to a different department, and his research team was disbanded. Official records state that the photograph and all associated materials were destroyed, but some evidence suggests they were actually moved to a secure facility designed for containing dangerous artifacts. Princeton University became the second institution to ban research on the photograph when a graduate student in the history department obtained bootleg copies of Wells' original documentation. Within 2 weeks of beginning her research, Sarah Chen began experiencing what she described as temporal displacement episodes. She would lose hours at a time, finding herself in locations with no memory of how she had arrived there. During these episodes, witnesses reported seeing her speaking in voices that weren't her own, the voices of children, pleading for help, in accents and dialects from the early 1900s. Chun's advisor, Professor Richard Blackthorne, attempted to document these episodes using video recording equipment. The resulting footage showed Sarah sitting alone in an empty room, but the audio captured multiple voices, children crying, adults screaming, and underneath it all, a low rumbling sound that analysis revealed to contain frequencies that shouldn't be audible to human ears. Most disturbing, when the audio was played back through specialized equipment, it seemed to induce similar dissociative states in anyone who listened to it. The university's psychology department brought in specialists from multiple fields to evaluate Chen's condition. Neurologists found unusual activity in areas of her brain associated with memory formation, but the patterns didn't match any known psychological or neurological disorders. Her brain scans showed activity suggesting that she was simultaneously experiencing multiple timelines, as if her consciousness was somehow split across different temporal realities. Princeton's decision to ban the research came after Chen vanished. During what was supposed to be a routine evaluation session, security cameras showed her entering the psychology building, but she was never seen leaving. A thorough search revealed no trace of her presence, as if she had simply ceased to exist. Her personal belongings remained untouched in her dormitory room, but all her research notes related to the 1909 photograph had vanished without a trace. Yale University's involvement began when Professor Margaret Thornfield, a specialist in historical photography, obtained access to the photograph through underground academic networks. Dr. Thornfield had built her career on debunking supernatural claims related to historical images, and she approached the Blackwood Academy, photographed with the intention of definitively proving it was an elaborate hoax. Using cutting-edge forensic analysis techniques, Dr. Thornfield subjected the photograph to every test available to modern science. Carbon dating confirmed that the photographic paper and chemical processes were authentic to 1909. Spectral analysis revealed no evidence of digital manipulation or composite imaging. Even more puzzling, microscopic examination showed that the photograph contained details that were impossible given the photographic technology available in 1909, level of clarity and depth that wouldn't be achieved until decades later. But Dr. Thornfield's investigation took a horrifying turn when she attempted to recreate the conditions under which the photograph was taken. Using historical weather data, astronomical calculations, and architectural surveys, she determined the exact time and positioning of the original photo session. When she visited the abandoned site of Blackwood Academy at the precise moment when the photograph would have been taken 114 years earlier, she experienced what she later described as temporal bleeding. At exactly 2:47 p.m. on November 3, 2023, Dr. Thornfield reported seeing the ghostly images of the children and teachers materialize in the overgrown courtyard. But these weren't peaceful spirits. They were trapped, constantly reliving the moment of terror captured in the photograph. She watched in horror as the scene played out repeatedly, like a film loop, with the children's fear intensifying each time the cycle repeated. Most disturbing of all, Dr. Thornfield realized that she wasn't just observing this supernatural reenactment, she was becoming part of it. With each repetition, she found herself more solidly anchored in the 1909 timeline, slowly losing her connection to the present. She managed to escape only by deliberately damaging the camera equipment she had brought to document the phenomenon, somehow breaking the temporal loop that was pulling her backward through time. Now, I need you to really engage with this story. Comment below and tell me, have you ever experienced something that made you question the nature of time itself? Have you ever seen something that shouldn't exist, or felt like you were experiencing multiple realities simultaneously? Because what I'm about to tell you next suggests that the 1909 photograph isn't just documenting a historical horror, it's actively creating new ones. Yale University's research revealed that the photograph functions as what Dr. Thornfield termed a temporal anchor, a fixed point that prevents the traumatic events of 1909 from remaining safely in the past. Every time someone views the image with genuine investigative intent, they create a connection between their present moment and that historical trauma. The photograph essentially uses viewers as conduits to project its horror across time. The university's decision to ban all research came after Dr. Thornfield's final report revealed the true scope of the photograph's influence. Her investigation uncovered evidence that similar images exist in archives around the world. School photographs from different time periods and locations, all showing children frozen in identical expressions of terror, all connected to subsequent unexplained deaths and disappearances. These photographs form what Dr. Thornfield called a network of temporal wounds, moments where something so fundamentally evil occurred that it created permanent damage to the fabric of time itself. The 1909 Blackwood Academy photograph isn't unique. It's part of a global pattern of supernatural documentation that spans centuries. Her research suggested that certain locations become infected with temporal instability when extreme trauma occurs. These sites developed the ability to project their horror across time, using photographic images as vectors of transmission. Anyone who studies these images with sufficient intensity becomes a carrier, spreading the temporal infection to new locations and time periods. The implications were staggering. Dr. Thornfield's data indicated that the three universities' research efforts had inadvertently created new temporal anchor points. Harvard, Princeton, and Yale had become infected sites, places where the past and present were beginning to bleed together. Students and faculty at all three institutions began reporting anomalous experiences, historical figures appearing in modern classrooms, contemporary technology malfunctioning in patterns that suggested interference from past eras. And most disturbing of all, the gradual appearance of new, impossible photographs in university archives. The final piece of evidence that led to the complete research ban came from Dr. Thornfield's analysis of the photographer himself. Harrison Wells, the man who had originally captured the 1909 image, had continued working for 3 decades after discovering the supernatural photograph. But examination of his later work revealed a disturbing pattern. Every school photograph he took after 1909 showed subtle signs of temporal contamination. Children with expressions slightly too fearful for a normal portrait session, shadows that fell in impossible directions, and background details that belonged to different time periods. Wells had become a carrier of the temporal infection, unknowingly spreading it to every location where he worked. Dr. Thornfield's research team tracked down hundreds of photographs taken by Wells between 1909 and his death in 1941, finding evidence of supernatural phenomena in nearly every image. Most disturbing, they discovered that many of the children in Wells' later photographs had suffered fates similar to those in the original Blackwood Academy image: unexplained deaths, mysterious disappearances, and psychological breakdowns that medical science couldn't explain. The photographer's personal journals, discovered in a storage facility after his death, revealed the full horror of his situation. Wells had known what was happening, but felt powerless to stop it. He wrote about seeing the ghostly children from the 1909 photograph appearing at every subsequent photo session, standing behind him, reaching out toward the new children he was photographing. He described how the camera itself seemed to have become infected, continuing to capture supernatural phenomena even when he tried to destroy it. Wells' final journal entry, dated 3 days before his death, contained a warning that still sends chills through anyone who reads it. The photograph isn't just showing us the past, it's creating the future. Every time someone looks at it, really looks at it, they're adding their own moment to its collection. Someday, there will be so many moments, so much accumulated horror, that time itself will collapse under the weight. The past, present, and future will merge into one eternal moment of terror, and we'll all be trapped in that courtyard forever, watching the shadow behind the photographer reach out for us. Here's what makes this story truly terrifying. And I need you to share this with others, because what I'm about to reveal affects all of us. The 3 universities haven't just banned research on the 1909 photograph, they've implemented active suppression protocols. Teams of specialists monitor internet activity, academic databases, and private collections, working to prevent the image from circulating freely. They've classified it as a cognitohazardous artifact, something that poses a threat to human consciousness simply by being perceived. But the suppression efforts have revealed something even more disturbing. The photograph appears to be actively resisting containment. Digital copies manifest spontaneously in archives where they've never been stored. Physical prints appear in collections where they've been officially destroyed. Most unsettling, new versions of the photograph keep appearing, identical compositions, showing the same terrified children, but with subtle differences that suggest they're documenting slightly different versions of the same traumatic event. These variant photographs imply that the original trauma at Blackwood Academy created fractures in multiple timelines simultaneously. We're not dealing with a single supernatural event, but with a cascade of parallel horrors that are slowly bleeding through into our reality. Each university that attempted to study the phenomenon inadvertently created new fracture points, expanding the network of temporal wounds that the photograph represents. The government agencies now involved in the suppression effort have classified the 1909 photograph under protocols typically reserved for nuclear materials or biological weapons. Viewing the image without proper psychological preparation is considered a form of exposure that can permanently alter an individual's relationship with time and reality. Special containment facilities have been constructed to house not just the original photograph, but also the dozens of variant images that continue to manifest. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of this entire situation is that the containment efforts may actually be accelerating the phenomenon they're trying to suppress. By treating the photograph as a dangerous artifact, authorities have inadvertently increased its power. The more people who know about its existence, the stronger its influence becomes. The more effort that's expended trying to hide it, the more desperately it seeks new ways to manifest. Recent reports from the containment facilities describe technological malfunctions that follow patterns, suggesting supernatural interference. Security cameras capture images of children who aren't present. Digital storage systems develop files that weren't uploaded by human operators. Most disturbing, personnel at these facilities report experiencing the same temporal displacement episodes that affected the university researchers. The situation has reached a point where some experts believe the only way to neutralize photograph's influence would be to allow it to complete whatever process it began in 1909. This theory suggests that the image is trying to communicate something crucial about the nature of time, trauma, and human consciousness. By suppressing it, we may be preventing it from delivering a warning that could be essential for humanity's survival. Underground academic networks have formed to study the phenomenon. Despite official prohibitions, these researchers work in secret, sharing information through encrypted channels and meeting in locations designed to minimize temporal contamination. Their work has revealed that the 1909 photograph may be part of a much larger pattern of supernatural documentation that includes images from ancient civilizations, medieval manuscripts, and even modern digital media. Some researchers believe that the photograph is actually trying to warn us about a future catastrophe, a moment when the accumulated trauma of human history will reach a critical mass and cause time itself to collapse. According to this theory, the children in the 1909 image aren't looking at something behind the photographer in their timeline. They're looking forward through time, seeing the moment when all of human history converges into a single point of ultimate terror. As I conclude this terrifying journey, I want you to understand the full implications of what you've just learned. The fact that you've heard this story, that you've engaged with these ideas, may have created a new connection between your consciousness and the temporal network that the photograph represents. You might now be part of the growing web of individuals who are linked to this supernatural phenomenon. Pay attention to your dreams over the next few weeks. Notice if you find yourself in unfamiliar historical settings, particularly if they involve children in distress. Watch for anachronistic details in photographs you encounter, elements that seem slightly out of place for their supposed time period. Most importantly, be aware of any gaps in your memory, any moments where you lose time without explanation. If you experience any of these phenomena, document them carefully, but don't share the details publicly. The suppression protocols are still in effect, and authorities continue to monitor for signs of the photograph's expanding influence. Instead, comment below, using coded language. Tell me about your dreams or interesting historical discoveries. Others who are experiencing similar phenomena will understand what you mean. Remember that the three universities didn't ban research on the 1909 photograph because they solved the mystery. They banned it because they realized that some mysteries are too dangerous to solve. They discovered that the act of investigation itself was feeding the supernatural phenomenon, making it stronger and more widespread with each person who tried to understand it. But perhaps that's exactly what the photograph wants us to believe. Perhaps the real horror isn't the supernatural events it documents, but the way it convinces us that knowledge itself is dangerous, that some truths should remain hidden. Maybe the greatest victory of the entities behind the Blackwood Academy tragedy would be to make us afraid of our own curiosity, to convince us that ignorance is safer than understanding. So I leave you with this final question, and I genuinely want you to think carefully before answering. Are you brave enough to seek the truth, even when that truth might change you forever? Are you willing to risk becoming part of something larger and more terrifying than anything you've previously imagined? Because once you start looking for the signs, once you begin to understand the true scope of the temporal network that connects us all, there's no going back to the comfortable illusion that time moves in only one direction. The 1909 photograph is still out there, still calling to those who are ready to answer. The children in that image are still trapped in their moment of terror, still trying to warn us about what they see approaching from our future. And somewhere, in a place that exists between seconds, between heartbeats, between thoughts, the shadow behind the photographer is still reaching out, still trying to add new faces to its eternal collection of frozen fear. Share this story, but do so carefully. Connect with others who have felt the pull of the impossible. But protect yourself by maintaining healthy skepticism. The truth about the 1909 photograph may be more important than the universities want us to believe, but it's also more dangerous than most people are prepared to handle. Welcome to the network. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to the beginning of your understanding that reality is far more fragile, far more malleable than you ever imagined. And remember, in the world of temporal anomalies and supernatural photographs, the most important rule is this: sometimes the greatest courage is knowing when to stop looking. The choice is yours. It always has been. And somewhere in the space between what you think you know and what actually exists, the truth is waiting for you to decide whether you're ready to face it.